Yes, is it visible, madam? Yes.
So, good evening, everybody. First of all, I take this opportunity to wish you all a very happy Makar Sankranti. So, today is really an auspicious day, and what we are going to do today is also equally good and worth the occasion, I feel. So, yesterday we saw how we can use basic statistical tools such as t-test, chi-square test, z-test to understand the data better and to draw inferences from the data, which could be useful to the client or to yourself if you are a researcher. So in the same manner now, we are going to move one step ahead. So in today's session, first I would be discussing regression models. So very simple linear regression models we are going to discuss. And then in the half of the session, the later half of the session, I would be discussing a case study, which I handled last year because of a collaborative work. So let us first see what do we mean by regression models and in which cases we can use it. This later part, regression diagnostic, we shall skip because that is a more technical part and can be skipped in most of the general cases. So we won't go there because we have time limitation, but we will definitely discuss simple and multiple linear regression models. So I think yesterday Mr. Das or somebody else had raised a question regarding the shoe size and age. And I had mentioned that we cannot use the usual t-test there because it's not the same. As age changes, the shoe size is going to change. And so it's like we have a variable of interest that is shoe size and we have something that influences. So something that is dependent. So shoe size is dependent on age. Age is not dependent on shoe size, but shoe size is dependent on age. So this is a typical regression model setup. So today we will try to understand it better through this talk. So let us first look at the simple linear regression model. So what do we mean by a regression model? So I have tried to consider example which all of us can understand because we were students at some stage. We are still students, so we can understand these things. So what do we mean by regression? So regression analysis is basically a statistical technique for investigating and modeling the relationship between variables. Now, a variable of interest is linked with other variables through some function, and that we call as a regression function or regression model. So what do we mean? Now, let me elaborate this through an example. So let us consider a table, this as shown here. And here the table contains internal scores and final scores of some students in a subject. So the subject can be, say, mathematics. So in mathematics, the first student has got 75 marks in the internal examination, whereas in the final examination, he has got 52 marks. Then in the internal examination, the second student got 93 marks, but in the final examination, he got 85 marks. So it's like these internals were conducted within college and not on the complete syllabus. So students were studying some part of the syllabus at a given time, and then such multiple internal tests were conducted and their average is 75 out of 100. And this one is also out of 100. So now usually if internal score is very low, students tend to study more for the final exam. They become more serious and then they try to work harder and get a better score in order to get a better score. So we can safely say that if a teacher or if a person is interested in knowing what can be the final score of a student in his subject, then he can very much relate it to the internal score of the same student in the same subject. So internal scores become a factor or a quantity which influences the final score. So by final score, I mean final score in the final end of the term examination and not the average of everything. By this, I mean the final score with the score which student got in the end of term or university examination, you can say. So this is how it is. So here this final score becomes the variable of interest, which usually is denoted by the letter Y and is referred to as response variable, and the quantity which influences this variable of interest is called as predictor or regressor, and hence then the term regression model. Now, what do we mean by that? Let me elaborate it a bit more. So, we assume that there is a linear relationship between these two. Means if one increases, the other will be, means the other can then be increasing, and if one is lesser, then the other can also be lesser. So there is some kind of linear dependency between the internal score and final score. So a regression model can then be fitted to the final score by taking internal scores as regressors. So for example, let us consider the shoe size and age example. So in that case, the shoe size is supposed to depend on age. No? So as age increases, obviously we are talking about the younger ones. So as age increases, so we can take a newborn baby, then a baby who is 1 year old, the baby who is 2 year old, and so on. And we have information on their shoe sizes at each age, and then we have the age information also. So age, in this context, age will become a factor which in a way decides the shoe size. And so we can, assuming that age and shoe size are linearly related to each other. Now by linear relation, we mean we can apply the formula y equal to a plus bx, the linear equation, the equation of a line. So if we can apply this simple formula to these two variables, then we can use the regression model. All the regression models that we encounter usually are linear regression models. So please keep this in mind. Now let us move to the next slide. So now how do we decide whether we should go for linear regression or regression model or not? So what I have done here, this is a real data, by the way. This data is not a fabricated or textbook data. This data is from a subject which I had taught long time back, and the scores I had retained. So I have removed the student details, but these are real scores. So now how do we decide whether we should go for linear regression model or not? So what one can easily do is look at the plot of response variable against regressor. So look at the this kind of plot is called as scatter plot. So you look at the plot of internal scores and external scores together, and if the points are around the line, if you can approximate these points by a line, then you can go for linear regression model. So here you can see that these points are around this line. So this line is called as line of regression, and these points are the actual data points. So yes, you can see that there is a linear relationship between internal score and final score, and so we can go for the linear regression model. So let us now this question I have put, can we predict the final score based on the internal score? So why do we want, I have got the data, why do we want linear regression model? So let us look at the data again. This is just a snapshot of the data. So it is not entire data. Data contains more points, but you can see that I have values, internal score 75, internal score 93, 90, 100. So very different values are there. See, you can see this. Some students have got as low as 60 marks in internals, and so their external score is very low. Whereas now see here, one student has got 100 marks in internal, so his external score is very high. So now I suppose there is a student in the class who has missed the final examination, and he has gotten, say, 65 marks in the internal examination. Then the teacher is curious and he wants to know what would have happened if the student would have attended the or would have appeared for the final exam? What would have been his score? So then, using the regression model technique, he can fit this regression model to the data and then can find the student score. He can predict the student score who has got 65 marks in the internal, even though actually in the data set there is no student who has got exactly 65 marks. So this is the major aim of regression model. The aim is to be able to predict the values of response variable using the values of the predictor variables. So using the internal scores, one can predict the external scores if the internal scores lie in this range, that is 50 to 100. Here the data range, the internal score range in the actual data is 50 to 100. So for any point in this range, one can predict using the regression model, one can predict the external score. So this is the major aim of the regression model, and that is to be able to predict the values of the variable of interest. So here by variable of interest, we mean any quantity which we are interested in. So in the earlier case of age and shoe size was the variable of interest. Now let us quickly go through the technical details of the model. So here I have listed what all I have said so far. The variable of interest, that is student's final score, is response variable. This is called as response variable. It is usually denoted by the letter Y. Then the variable which influences the final score, that is student's internal score, is the explanatory variable, because it is explaining Y. It is helping in understanding the variable Y. And so it is also called as predictor or regressor variable. Now, in regression model, we try to establish a relationship between the variable of interest and the predictor variable, which is usually denoted by the letter X. So a simple linear regression model, by simple linear regression, we mean that we have just one predictor and we have response variable is always one. Only one quantity you can predict at a time. But regressors can be multiple. So when only one regressor is there, means only one predictor is there, then you can use simple linear regression model. See now, for example, in the context of age and shoe size, now because if parents are tall, then kids also tend to be tall. And so you can say that father's shoe size can be another regressor, which we can use to find the child's shoe size. Mother's shoe size also can be taken as another factor which can probably influence the shoe size of the child, and so on. So there can be so many other details. Height of the child can be taken as a quantity which influences shoe size. So in this manner, we can have so many quantities which influence the quantity of our interest. And so when just one quantity is taken into account and is used for constructing the model, such a regression model is called as simple linear regression model. So this is how it is written statistically. Y is equal to beta naught plus beta 1x plus epsilon. This is just the equation of line, which you might have studied in 10th standard. Y equal to a plus bx. So where a is the intercept and b is the slope of the line. So in the same manner, beta naught is the intercept and beta 1 is the slope of the regression line. So this is the summary. So it's a straightforward way. Sorry, it's a very straightforward approach for predicting a quantity on the basis of a single predictor variable X. So now let us move forward. So this is about the simple linear regression model. So beta naught plus y is equal to beta naught plus beta 1 x plus epsilon. These quantities are estimated by using the actual data that we have on y and x. So the data beta naught hat, and so let us skip the technicalities such as how do we estimate beta naught and beta 1, and so the software does all of that. So but See, it's like, so this is the predicted model now. Once you have got the estimates using the data, once you have got the values for beta naught and beta 1, let us assume that these values are beta naught hat and beta 1 hat. So you put them here and then ignore this error now. So you have this, this will be the predicted value of y, which is denoted by the letter y hat. So y hat equal to beta naught hat plus beta 1 hat x. That would be the fitted regression model. Now, I was talking about a student no, who has got 65 marks in the internal examination, but did not appear for the final examination. So I can put x equal to 65 and can substitute the values of beta naught hat and beta 1 hat and get the value of y. That is final score. That would be my predicted value of the final score of that particular student who had got 65 marks in the internal examination but missed the examination. So I can guess, using this model, I can try to find values which are not originally available in the data. This is the interesting part and major application of regression models. So this is a technical, this we can skip, this slide we can skip. Okay, now, but yeah, this one is important. What or when can we apply linear regression model? In your data, how do you decide whether regression model is applicable or not? A linear regression model is applicable or not? So I shall tell you something now as an example. So this internal, yes, external, that's understood. But there are several such examples. So for example, suppose now so many people order online na? And they receive doorstep delivery. So each delivery boy has to deliver multiple items at multiple locations. So suppose that the time time taken by a particular delivery person to deliver items and the number of items that he has delivered and the distance. So suppose he starts from one particular place and he goes on delivering items. And so say he has to deliver say 30 items in a day. And so the locations, so the distance is also there. So the number of items that he delivers on a day will depend on the distance also, na? So if the distance is more, he won't be able to deliver too many items in a given day. But if the distance is less, then he would be able to deliver more items in a day. So number of items to be delivered can be taken as a variable of interest because that is the target for that delivery boy. And then the distance. So average distance, how much average distance per item he has to travel, that can be taken as a quantity which influences the number of items to be delivered. So this is a typical regression model setup that I am giving you. So in general, when it comes to taking a decision regarding whether to go for linear regression model or not, one can just get the scatter plot and can get the data. So if the actual data is around a fitted regression line, then regression is all right. Linear regression model is all right. But if too many values are falling far away from the regression line, then one should not go for linear regression model. That would be that it's very easy to judge. At least in simple linear regression model, it's very easy to judge. So these comments I have put just so that I'll be sharing these slides also. So you can refer to what all I have put on these slides. So now, as I have said earlier, the cases, the situations wherein you have only one quantity which influences the quantity of interest are less. In many cases, multiple factors are there which are influencing the quantity of interest. So in such cases, we deal with multiple linear regression model. So it is just an extension. Multiple linear regression model is an extension of simple linear regression model, and statistically speaking, the model looks like this. So you don't have just one regressor or predictor, but you have multiple predictors. So here we are assuming that we have k predictors. So this model is known as multiple linear regression model. So it is linear. So these are technical things. It is linear because beta 1 is linear, na? Beta not beta 1. This is a linear equation kind of thing. And so the model is referred to as linear. So I'll go directly now to the illustration. This one I think you would like. So suppose that now a statistical consultant is hired by a client to provide advice on how to improve sales of a particular product. Now, this manufacturer of this product is allocating some budget to the advertising. And then he has the data on advertising, the budget or the money spent on advertising of the product. So the advertisement was made on different platforms. So altogether, total money spent on advertising that product. And he also has information about this on so the advertisement was made on TV, radio, newspaper. So now can he link the money that the company spends on these different platforms on the advertisement with the sales of the product? See, company would spend money on the advertisements only if sales are increasing. If the advertisement are not impacting the sales, then it is of no use. So now this statistical consultant is hired to decide, to check whether the advertisement are helping in increasing sales or not. So how do they go about this? So the goal is to develop an accurate model that can be used to predict the sales on the basis of the three media budgets. So what the company does is they decide, okay, on this much money would be spent on advertisement on the television. This much would be spent on advertisement on the radio, and this much for the newspaper. So they have allocated budget. Now, once people have that data, can they predict sales of the company? So say for last year, I know that this much money was spent and this many were the sales. So say I have this data for a couple of years or a couple of months, for a few years or for a few months. So say month-wise data I have. So I have last 12 months data. So I've got 12 numbers. Now can I predict if say for the next month, this much is the budget for the advertisement for these three media, then can we try to predict the sales of that particular product based on the earlier information that we have had. So this is what multiple linear regression model does. So this is again a real data. So see here, you can see this is a matrix plot. So here we have got all the scatter plots together. So now what is it? So see here, the variable sales. So how much money was spent? What was the sales and how much budget was allocated to television? So this scatter plot or the graph of sales against television budget is here. Then the scatter plot of sales and the advertising budget for radio is here. And the scatter plot of sales and the advertising budget for newspaper is here. So you can see that when it comes to advertisement on television and the sales, as more and more money is spent on the television, more and the sales are also increasing. But when you consider to the higher side, it's not exactly increasing. Na? See, for here, for example, the point at which now I have put the cursor. So here, television budget, we have reached extreme. So a lot of money is being spent on advertisement on the television, but whereas the sales have been only at this. So sales aren't that large. Na? Sales aren't that large if you go to this side, but for some, the sales are large. So this is how it is. So it's not the same. So we can't say that it is very much linear, but at least for TV, it is approximately linear. But for radio, it is not at all linear. And same is the case with newspaper. It is not much linear, but one can always try. So because software is ultimately going to tell you na, whether the model is good or not. So one can always try to fit the model and get the outcome and then try to understand it. So we have done this in R. So okay, now when it comes to regression model, how do you decide whether the model is good enough or not? So a regression model, I hope that you are able to see this. So I've increased the size. So this I am showing here output of regression model, which we usually get in R or any package. You can go for SPSS, SAS, Minitab. All the packages, they show you, when you try to fit a regression model, they show you R squared, see multiple R squared or adjusted R squared value. So this indicates how much good a regression model is. So usually this value is supposed to be high around, so when you say the value is say 0.89, then you can say that it is 89% good, or 89% is the explained variation in the data. So higher the value of adjusted R square, better the model is. So in some cases, if the adjusted R squared is only 0.4 or 0.5, then one should not go for such a regression model. Having adjusted R square 0.5 or less than 0.5 is not a good situation, and people then don't go for such regression model. Then they try to modify things and then they try to fit a better model. But a model such as this is a good enough model, and it will be able to give decent predictions for based on the data. So this, I think here I would stop discussion about regression model, because I want to now spend more time on discussing the case studies. Yes.
Ma'am, thing is that we need to also check the assumptions. Then only we can finalize the model, right?
Yeah, yes. So I have the discussion regarding model assumptions here on the slides, but because people are from commerce background also, no. So I thought, yes, definitely the assumptions have to be verified. So these are there. So I have got the slides. But
Even in newspaper also, I think if you look at the correlation map, then we will see not a linear but a non-linear pattern in the data.
yeah, but it can contribute to some extent in explaining variation in the cells, no?
Exactly.
So it is not necessary that every time a perfect linear or approximately linear relationship will be there, but still the variable can help in contributing. It can have some contribution in the model. So for example, here see these numbers. So when you look at the newspaper, it's coming out to be insignificant. These asterisk signs denote whether the variable is significant or not. So you have three asterisk, means that look at the TV. So if you look at the output, you have three asterisk. It means that the variable is important, strongly important for the model. Same is the case with radio, but whereas for newspaper, it's coming out to be, p-value is coming out to be 0.86. Na? So as we discussed yesterday, when p-value is greater than 0.05, we do not reject H node. And here H node is that this newspaper is not needed in the model. So all these are, the last column gives you p-values for each of these items, TV, radio, newspaper. So I do need TV in the model. I do need radio. The information about TV and radio is needed to predict sales, but the information about newspaper budget is not needed. So that idea you get from the graph, no? Because sales and newspaper, it doesn't look linear at all, no? So yes, you are right. We need to verify model related assumptions. Is there any other question?
Ma'am,
Yes.
yeah, like now people are going for ANOVA, etc. So for a data set, can we do both ANOVA and regression model?
These are two different things. See, ANOVA, okay, take yesterday's example. Yesterday's example was if I have groups, no? Say, consider the example of the final score. So suppose I am teaching multiple classes and I am considering final score of those multiple classes of the 9th standard student and I want to compare them. So there is nothing. Now I have information only on final score of 9th standard student of say division A, division B, division C, division D. And I want to check whether the division is a factor which is influencing performance of the student. So in this case, I would go for ANOVA because I don't have any other factor which is influencing, or I don't have information regarding any other factor which is influencing these final scores. So when that is the case, then I should go for ANOVA. But when you have something which can influence the quantity of interest, then you should go for regression model. And even in regression model also you have ANOVA. ANOVA is basically analysis of variance. So you can do it for any statistical model. So this adjusted R square comes as a result of the ANOVA only.
Okay, ma'am. Got it.
So yes, model related assumptions have to be verified. Is there anybody else who has a question?
Ma'am,
Yes.
good evening, ma'am. Yeah,
Yes, good
actually,
evening.
in case of this multiple regression, this y as a function of x1, x2, x3 up to xn like this. So I think is it always required that all x1, x2 will be mutually independent?
Exercise, you are asking very good question. See, it's possible that they among themselves are related.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
That is possible. Then there would be, see,
So
if they are
is it
dependent on each other, say x1 is dependent on x2,
correct?
and both are there, then if both are so much related to each other, then you don't need both of them in the model. Na? One of them would be enough
Yes,
then,
ma'am.
because using one, I
Yes,
can
ma'am.
find the other.
So we have to ensure that x1, x2, x3 all are mutually independent.
More or less independent. Approximately. I wouldn't say, because in real data, you don't get. So the case study that I'm going to discuss deals with such case wherein they are heavily linearly dependent on each other. Heavily, very heavily. Yes. Any other question? I see one more raised hands.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, good evening.
Could we apply SIM for non-probability sampling data?
Pardon? Yes.
Could we apply for SIM model? Apply for non-probability sampling?
Non-probability, I did not get it. Can you elaborate it more?
Ma'am, could we apply for non-probability sampling SIM model, ma'am? Could we apply for SIM model for non-probability sampling?
Non-probability sampling means, what do you mean by that?
Ma'am?
I'm sorry, help me understand your question. Non-probability sampling means, do you mean that the variable is not, means you are not considering any
probability sampling or non-probability sampling? I selected for non-probability sampling means I apply for a SIM model, structural equation model.
Yeah, you can. But see, I would be able to answer your question correctly if you share more details.
Okay, ma'am.
If you have, say, particular data, if you don't want to ask me in the live class, it's all right. You can send an email and I can help you out there.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Because structural equation modeling is a different thing.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a more challenging stuff. And it
Yes, ma'am.
needs careful calculations.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, any other question? If done, shall we continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. So, yes, so was the question was raised by the first questioner. So yes, there are model related assumptions. See, the major assumption is that the relationship between the quantity of interest and the quantities which influence it is approximately linear. So we will definitely look at the case wherein that is not so. And then these are major assumptions that the error term. So in all there is zero error. So if you consider total error committed by the model, then it is 0. Means if you add all errors together, then then the addition is 0. Then the error term has same variance. Then the errors are uncorrelated. Then the errors are normally distributed. So all these are standard model related assumptions and can be verified very easily, very quickly through graphs. So how do we verify it? So I'll show you. So normality, okay. How do we verify normality? So using the Shapiro test that I have mentioned yesterday, normality of errors in the regression model can be verified by checking normality of the residuals of the model, and the residuals are readily available when you fit a regression model in R or any package. The residuals are automatically calculated and one can access it. So I will show you, if we have time, I'll definitely show you how to do it in R also. So normality of residuals would establish normality of errors. Now the one assumption is that the errors should be, yes, the error term should have constant variance. So how do we verify it? So here I have put in, so this one, the assumption of constant variance is verified through the plot of residuals against fitted values. So if this plot exhibits patterns like opening funnel or a bow, then it indicates that the variance is not same for all the points. And this means that a situation usually called as heteroscedasticity is there. And then that has to be dealt separately. Then the situation which one of the participants mentioned, that is the situation wherein the regressors themselves are correlated. Say x1, x2 are correlated, then such a situation is referred to as multicollinearity, and that too has to be dealt with separately. Then the assumption of uncorrelatedness of errors is usually verified by a sequential plot of the residuals. So if all the residuals fall in a horizontal band, then it would mean that, and if there is no pattern in the graph, then it would mean that the residuals or errors are uncorrelated. So see here, in the first case, this first graph is actually graph of residuals against the fitted values. So in the first graph, you can see that all the values are lying in a horizontal band, and there is no pattern in the plotted values. And so we can say that the residuals are uncorrelated. Whereas in the rest of the graphs, you can see patterns. So this is an opening funnel kind of thing. This is a bow kind of thing. This is also, so there is a pattern in the data. So there is a pattern in the graph. So if the graph exhibits a pattern of any of these types, then it would mean that the variance is not constant and the errors are not uncorrelated. So for example, in the first graph, see, you can see first it is increasing. This is a sequential plot of residuals or errors. So initially it is increasing, then it is decreasing, then again it is increasing. So this will definitely mean that the errors are not uncorrelated. These four graphs are checking whether the variance is constant or not. So because this is opening funnel type or this is a bow type pattern, so it will mean that variance is not constant. So these four graphs are used to check whether variance is constant or not. These four graphs represent four possible situations. So in the first graph, variance is constant, whereas in the rest of the graphs, variance is not constant. Means variance is not the same. So yes, and this I have plotted here, the result of Shapiro test, Shapiro-Wilk normality test. So you can see p-value. So the hypothesis, by default, the hypothesis is that the errors are normally distributed, and the p-value is coming out to be 0.1758. Means I have got 17.58% evidence in support of the hypothesis that the data is following normality. And so I'll accept it, and I would say that yes, the errors are normally distributed. Same thing can be verified through the QQ plot also. So if the values are around the line, then normality is there. So this QQ plot is also readily available in R and all standard statistics softwares. So this is how one can carry out the model diagnostics through analyzing the residuals. So I think up to this was my intention to
Ma'am.
introduce regression models to you so that when I talk about the case study, you will understand it. Otherwise, those who are not at all familiar with regression models wouldn't have understood this. So now
Ma'am,
may
one
I?
question was there.
Yes.
In the QQ plot, if you see the last observation,
It's
it,
an,
it
yes,
is
it is
it
going
is
ahead.
it is quite far from the line
Far
of it.
away.
So hence
Yes.
it can be a potential outlier.
Yes, it can be an outlier. But see, then such outliers should be studied separately, na? So there are two options. Either you remove the outlier from the data and then fit the model again to the rest of the data and investigate the outlier separately. So see what is the reason why for this value, why there is so much difference in the fitted value and the actual value. So is there something more to the data? So more study needs to be done by discussing things with the client. So it's possible that for that particular medium of advertisement, lot of money was spent on television advertisement, but sales did not increase much, or sales increased, but not much money was spent on the advertisement for that particular product. So it's possible. So in that case, one can investigate further. But this one observation does not affect normality of the rest of the observations. So the p-value is supporting this hypothesis.
Ma'am.
Yeah,
in machine learning, regression models are the basic ones which are used.
Yes.
Okay. So there to manage the errors, techniques such as gradient descent is used. Can you just brief on that, ma'am?
Gradient
descent method for reduction of, let us say, the errors in the fitted model.
Yeah, they try to optimize the way the parameters are estimated. So the fitted regression model would change. But right now, because our topic and area is in limited, so I can't discuss it further.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
But we will, if you are interested, you can contact me. You have my email address.
Yes, sure. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So shall we start the discussion about case study? Because I'm sure that all of you will find it very useful.
Yes,
Yeah.
madam, you can start.
Yeah, it's something that I have actually done. Last year, I have done this collaborative work. So I would like to discuss this now. So this is it. So the question is now, how can we use regression model, or not even regression model? How can we use statistics to estimate proportions in mixtures? So what do we mean by proportions in mixtures? You would ask, what is the mixture that I deal with in my day-to-day life? And the answer will surprise you. Is there anybody who has never taken a crocin or a paracetamol tablet in his entire life? Is there anybody? Yes, I can see raised hands. Please ask your question. Yes, I can see 2 raised hands. If you have question, please ask now. Or lower your hands, please. Okay, so I'll continue. So I hope that all of you are familiar with this tablet.
Madam, one question I have. Like there is a concept of failure rate of a vehicle which is happening in a 3 months period. And there is a 6 month period, then there is a 9 month period and 12-month period. I have data for 3, 6 and 9. But for 12, 24, where that data is not there, then with 3, 6
we can try to project. We can try to fit a regression model. Yes, definitely. But see here, the question is, how many values do you have for 3 months? How many values for 6 months? What is the data size?
Data size is huge. More than 10,000 or 12,000 points are there. For different
Okay.
complaints, for a single complaint, there could be 1,000 data or some
Is this a
1,000 line
kind of
items or
warranty
1,000
analysis?
line items. Warranty analysis. Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
So you know, statistics has a special branch for warranty data analysis. All the methods in there you can use for your data. You drop an email to me, I'll share the relevant documents with you. I'll help you.
Sure,
Warranty
madam.
data analysis is itself a mini branch of applied statistics. I have done initially in the beginning of my teaching career, I have done warranty data analysis. So yes, you can do that because the data size is huge, na? So 3 months, 6 months data together, you can use them as regressors and can try to predict or project the numbers for 12 months. 24 months, I don't know how good it will be. But for 12 months, I feel like because the data size is huge, we will be able to ultimately get a good model.
Okay, madam. Thank you. I'll definitely reach out to you on mail.
Yeah, sure. Warranty data, yes, definitely. I've handled long time back, but I have handled. Any other question? Okay, so let us continue with this. So I was talking about mixtures. So drugs, medicines. All our medicines are mixtures of different ingredients. So for example, the crocin tablet that we have. So it's mixture of 2 ingredients, paracetamol and caffeine. What will happen if you have, instead of 650 mg, if you have say very less, say 350 or say 250 mg, will it help you in pain relief? Obviously, it won't help you it won't give you much of a relief from the pain. So proportion in which these two are included in a tablet matters a lot, and this proportion can't deviate much. Means even if you reduce it to 600 or say 500, still that would impact the result that one gets after taking that kind of tablet. So you might have heard adulteration and all such things happen, or fake drugs, or drugs produced illegally. So all such things happen. So might have heard about this news. I don't know. Some of you might have read. So this is a clipping from news article at Reuters, which appeared on 13th September 2023. So not far away. So this is about people living in hilly regions. So you can say Himachal Pradesh or similar, wherein the medical stores aren't that common. And in fact, one has to travel say 2 or a couple of kilometers to reach a medical store. So now this news had appeared, which says that a cough syrup killed around 16 students, around 16 children below age 5 or 10. So the kids were below age 10, and after drinking the said cough syrup, controversial cough syrup, the children died. So a cough syrup is supposed to cure children from the cough and not supposed to kill the children. So how did it happen? Why the cough syrup ended up killing these kids? So a cough syrup is again supposed to be a mixture of 2 ingredients. But so the composition of the ingredients is also already predetermined. There is a standard setup by which there is a standard proportion, and this proportion has to be strictly followed. So now in case of wait a minute, now in case of this these 16 kids, this cough syrup had additional surprise ingredient, which itself is toxin, basically poison. And this ingredient was DEG. So those who are from chemistry background would know this. And it was found to be 34% in these cough syrups, the cough syrup which these kids drank. So 34% is a huge number. And you would be surprised to know that only 0.10%, so very small 0.10% of this ingredient is allowed. DEG is allowed in any cough syrup. So how did it happen? So because of this poisonous surprise ingredient, the third ingredient in the cough syrup, these kids had lost their lives. And so an inquiry committee was created, and then they investigated all of this. Then the controversial cough syrup bottles were seized and they were further analyzed, and then this component was found. So what statistics, what can be the role of statistics in identifying the proportion of ingredients in a drug which is easily available in the market? This is the question that we are trying to answer today. So I hope that you understand the significance of this. Okay, so the question is that suppose a tablet is available in the market, and there are certain, say, 2 ingredients. So let us consider the case of Crocin itself. Crocin is a brand name, but you can say any paracetamol tablet. So paracetamol tablet usually has 2 ingredients, paracetamol and flupitrin. So these 2 ingredients are supposed to be in certain proportion. So if the proportion isn't followed, then the tablet won't give the desired, the required effect. So how do we check this? So the common scenario, the common way to check this, I have put here on this slide. So the idea is take the 2 ingredients and create their mixtures in the laboratory. So wherein one would know the proportion already. So suppose 6:12, 6:18. So take paracetamol and flu in the proportion 6:12. Then create another lab mixture and take the paracetamol and flupitrin in the proportion 6:18. So create such different lab mixtures. So for original tablet, we don't know what is the proportion. So now then the idea is now this mixture is investigated through a spectrometer. So those who are from chemical technology would be already familiar with this. So it is investigated through spectrometer, and spectrometer, it's a kind of device. What it does is it at different wavelengths, it sees how much absorbance is happening. So absorbance values are recorded for different wavelengths. So these wavelengths are to be fixed by the person, or the bandwidth is decided by the person who is conducting this experiment, who is creating these mixtures. So suppose a pharmacology person, say a scientist, is involved and he wants to check whether the claims made by the drug manufacturer are correct or not. So what he will do? He will create these lab mixtures, then he will investigate these lab mixtures through the spectrometer, and he will get the readings of absorbance values at different wavelengths. So these absorbance values are going to help in determining the mixture. So now how do we do it? So the idea is that because for the lab mixture we know the proportion, so try to fit a regression model to the absorbance to the known proportions, by taking these absorbance values as the predictor variables, and then use this model to predict proportion for the original tablets. So for original tablets, we don't know the proportions. No? So the model that is developed for lab mixture is to be used to estimate proportions for the models, is to be used to estimate proportions for the tablets. So let us see. I'll show you the actual data. I think then the picture will be clearer. So see, this is the kind of data that a collaborator of mine had gotten. So so I have done this collaborative work with a professor from pharmacy college. So what he did was, he wanted to see whether the proportion of the ingredients in a typical paracetamol tablet is appropriate or not. So what he did was he created these lab mixtures. So he took this paracetamol denoted by PCM and flu in these different proportions. So 6:2, 6:3, 6:6, 6:9, 6:12. So he took 25 such combinations. And then what he did was he created lab mixture. He created a solution using these two ingredients in the dilute form. He created some solution and then he tested that solution through spectrometer, and those spectrometer was used at different wavelengths. So 220, 220.4, 220.8 and so on. So such around more than 300 values of wavelengths were there. So this data, this is just a snapshot of the data. This is not entire data. I'm just showing you some part of it. So from 220 till around 350 and the difference is of 0.4 only. So 220, 220.4, 220.8 and so on up to 350. So these were the wavelengths at which these absorbance values were recorded. So 0.232 is the absorbance value for this 6:2 proportion of the lab mixture at 220 wavelength. So I had a data. So this is a matrix, na, you can see. So I had a data matrix of size 25 because 25 combinations of PCM and flu were considered. So 25 rows and around more than 300 columns were there. So this was the size of the data. And now what I had to do? So using this, for this data, I know the proportions, na? So I will fit a regression model using all these columns as regressors. I will fit a model for the proportion of PCM. Then I'll fit another model for the proportion of flu. So once I have got the best possible model using this data is referred to as training data or calibration data. Then I will use this model to predict the values in the original tablet. So the way these lab mixtures are created, na, in the same manner, the original tablet is dissolved by using certain procedure and a solution is created. And then that solution is tested through the spectrometer. So chemical technology people, please forgive me if I am wrong or if there are technical errors in my description, because I have very crude knowledge about this process. What I am interested in these numbers. So I haven't learned the process much. So, but bear with me. So this is how it is. So I will use this model to predict the quantities for the original tablet. This is the idea. So calibration model is to be used for the test model. So I'll show you results. So this was my data now. Huh? So absorbance values for this original tablet. So at 220, the absorbance was 1.25. At 220.4, the absorbance was around 1.256 and so on. So now the original tablet I had on, and this was done twice. So entire experiment, so there were 2 repetitions of the entire experiment. So it was done once and again. So you can see the values are very close. 1.263, 1.264, not much variation is there in the values. So this is our test data. So the model that is developed using training data is used here and these proportions were estimated. And so now I'll show you further. These technical details I'll skip, but I'll tell you which regression model I have used. So I have used principal component, not the usual linear regression model, but I have used principal component regression model. I'll come back to the question that was raised in a few minutes back. The question was, what will happen if the regressors or if the quantities which are influencing the quantity of interest are themselves correlated? See here, in this context, these wavelength values are so close. So do you think that absorbance values are going to differ drastically if you change the wavelength just by 0.4? the absorbance values are not going to differ drastically. They are going to be very close. So when I calculated correlations between this column and this column, the answer was 0.99999. So I was getting a very high, very high correlation among these values. But fortunately, I had too many values, too many than I would have needed. And so I used certain feature selection procedures. So those who are doing those who are learning AI ML, those who are familiar with machine learning techniques might have heard this word, feature selection. So I did not take all the 300 values of the wavelengths. Instead, I chose them after discussion, having the discussion with the collaborator, and we tried to come up with the best possible model. So these features, different procedures of feature selections were applied, and then the model which gave the minimum error or the maximum accuracy was adopted. So, these were the results. So see here, these results are for training data. So when the actual value was 6, the model predicted it as 6.1. When the actual, so see, you can see whenever it is 6, the prediction is 6.1. Whenever it is 9, the prediction is 9.2. So close, so close. So, and when it is 18, the estimated value was 17.8. So because we got such a good model for the training data, we got good estimates for the test data as well. So now you might wonder, how did I decide? Which feature selection have I used? How did I decide? So here comes more information which I would like to share with you. These numbers definitely look impressive. For example, for flu, the numbers are so accurate. See, 2, I am predicting as 2.13. Here I have predicted correct. So the model's accuracy was almost 100.8%. Now you would ask, why, how can the model's accuracy be more than 100%? So the way these people, pharmacology people, measure accuracy is a bit different. What they do is they divide the estimated value by the actual value, and then they multiply it by 100, and then they take the average of it. So 6.1 will be divided by 6. So we are overestimating it, na? It is more than 6, na? So the accuracy, so this is done for all the values, and so we got 100.8% accuracy or recovery for the calibration data. And because such a good precision we got, so we got good estimates for the test data as well. And so the proportions were estimated accordingly. So this is how it was done. Now I'll come back to the question that I had raised before. How did I decide from this entire columns, rows of columns? So here I have put only 5-6 columns, na? But I had a Excel file wherein I had more than 300 columns. And here I have, the data size is only 25. So it's like I have to, at most I can have 25 columns, na? Because otherwise statistics, the regression models won't work there. No matter what kind of regression model this is, it won't work. If I have only 25 observations and the number of parameters to be estimated is more than 300. So I had to select some of the columns which will give me the best possible prediction. And therein the knowledge of the collaborator came in handy. He helped me in understanding the problem. And so here we studied the way the absorbance is happening for different ingredients. So if we consider only one ingredient at a time, then you can look at this graph that for from 220 to 350, just for PCM, this blue one is PCM, this red one is flu, and the black one is the mixture. Sorry, the arrows are wrongly placed, but the blue one is PCM, the red one is flu, and the black one is the mixture. So if we consider only PCM, then the absorbance for 220 to 350 wavelengths goes like this, indicated by the blue line. So it is maximum around the wavelength 250. Whereas if I consider only the flupytrine, the second component, then the absorbance values are very small for at around initially, and then beyond 300, then they start increasing a bit, but they are small compared to PCM values. They are definitely small. So we can say that the paracetamol, when it comes to absorbance, paracetamol is going to dominate the flu values. Moreover, if the wavelength is less than 300, then it is likely that we will be able to easily estimate the first component because its absorbance values are large. But when the wavelength is more than 300, then we can estimate the second component, that is flu, very easily. Because look at the mixture. The mixture curve, mixture curve is nothing but the absorbance values for the mixture of PCM and flu. So the PCM curve is much closer to the mixture curve when the bandwidth is less than 300. But when the wavelength is more than 300, then the PCM curve or the absorbance of PCM reaches 0. But whereas the absorbance of flu is same as the absorbance of the mixture. So this information was used, and accordingly the regressors or the columns were selected.
ఈ పట్టణాలు ఎత్తులు పట్టణాలు చూస్తారు ఏ చూస్తారు అది చూస్తారు మొత్తం తెల్లని దానిక పొద్దున్న పోయినా
So now here comes the conclusion.
Participants, please mute your audio.
ఎవరు కదా సచిన్
So here comes the conclusion. It is possible to estimate the contents of a mixture in a formulation with a high degree of accuracy. See, getting 100.8% is not easy. We tried so many models, and the models weren't giving us more than 88% accuracy. And 88% accuracy is not that admired, or it's not the preferred level of accuracy. People expect at least 90% or above 90% accuracy when it comes to estimation of proportions in a mixture, because it is such a critical matter. If you wrongly estimate them, if you give bad estimates, if you underestimate, or both of them, if you overestimate, either way it is going to kill the popularity of the drug. So it's not allowed. In this area, this is usually called as chemometry. So this is a typical chemometry discussion that we are having. So in chemometry, a high level of accuracy is always preferred. So it wasn't easy, but it is not impossible. So if we try to understand the data better, we can always come up with a good model. So yes, feature selection was an important part of the development of this statistical model. So this is the first conclusion. And the second conclusion is, it may be worthwhile to doubly check claims of competitors. So often a claim is made about how some very expensive ingredient is used in a formulation. So for example, when I don't want to use the brand names, but when certain health drinks say that it has double the iron than his competitor, then there can be a researcher. A researcher can always try to check whether it is actually double or not. Or if they claim that the height grows by this much, or if say there is no sugar or there are no preservatives. So whenever such claims are made, they are basically claims regarding the ingredients. And so what we did for this particular situation is very much applicable even in those situations. So for example, food adulteration. So these things can be checked by using this kind of chemometry and statistics together. So this was the conclusion, that on scrutiny, one may find that only a trace amount is used, and such information can be used by the marketers. So one should be very careful. So this is the offer that I have already shared. So here I am sharing my contact number as well, my email address and the office address. So those who are from chemical technology or have similar or are dealing with similar mixtures and are interested in estimating proportions of mixtures can feel free to contact me on this address. So now is the time that I have reserved for question and answer. So here I end my discussion.
No, madam. Hello.
Yes, ask, please.
This session. One question is, if you take the drug, is the composition is not
I'm
typically
sorry,
as
I'm unable to
like.
hear.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, let us say that the drug composition fixed is 6:12 of two proportions.
Yes.
So in actual practice, will it not be 6:12 only in when they are manufacturing?
No. These mixtures were created in the lab, no? Actually, we don't know what is the proportion.
Okay. Okay, but it can be used by manufacturers to fix the proportions as well, right? The right proportion.
The drug proportion would be already decided by those who created the drug, no?
Okay, okay.
Because otherwise the drug won't be effective. So that is part of the drug development.
Okay.
But a chemist won't know, or a person who is collecting this or having these tablets. So I have been eating, I have it. So we have had, I think most of us have had during COVID, we have had Dolo. So were we aware that Dolo has 3 times more paracetamol than the usual crocin? We weren't aware, na? Any other question?
Hello, am I audible, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah, good evening, ma'am. Actually, thank you very much for this excellent session. Yesterday's session also and today's session also. I'm Dr. Pranali. I'm actually working into biomedical signal processing. So
Okay.
I have been using linear regression. In a recent work, we wanted to use multiple variable regression for classification. But
Okay.
so we had taken some data for biomedical signal for around 100 patients, and we wanted to classify them into 4 diseases. From the diagnosis, we knew those diseases that they're suffering from. So we found out 12 parameters in the frequency, time domain, and so on. So we used ANOVA to find out which are the most significant parameters. We found out 6 parameters were significant. We plotted the graphs and we found out that yes, there is a significant difference. But we are not able to use multiple variable regression to come up with a single equation which relates the disease with these parameters. So can you help us with that?
I would suggest you can go for multi-logistic regression model. This is a classification problem, na? So
Yes,
in
ma'am. Yes,
typical logistic regression setup, the data is to be classified into 2 categories only. But when
yeah.
it comes to multiple categories, an extension of logistic regression can be used.
Yeah,
So it's
actually we
LDR.
tried doing that. We tried doing that, but every time we use it in a software, say R or MATLAB, it asks for an output variable Y. So here we are not able to identify what is that output variable Y.
Your
Do we give numbers?
disease is the output. So see, you should classify the data in training and test data. So for training data, you should have the disease identified and the other details of the disease. Then use this data to develop a model, multi-logistic regression model you can use. And then once the model is ready, you apply it for the test data where the diseases are not known.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am.
You can also go for clustering and see which values are
Yeah,
going
actually we did clustering and we found that 6 of these parameters are excellent classification. But then every time calculating 6 parameters, a practitioner may not do. So if we are able to simply give them a model which is quick, so they simply measure it and our system is able to say that the person is having probably this disease, it would be very useful.
Yeah, so look at the ANOVA table, the analysis of the regression model, and see which variables are coming out to be significant.
Once we found out out of 12, we found 6 were they had the highest difference from the critical. So those
even 6 you can reduce. You can try to reduce that number also. Once you have created a multi-logistic regression model, then there you can see relatively. So it's possible that if the first parameter is there, then the second isn't needed much.
Okay, maybe we'll try to do that. Yeah, we will try to do that. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah. Any other question? Now, this was interesting, by the way. Yes, there is a raised hand. So please ask. Any other question? So we have 10 minutes. Can I show something more? One more case study?
Yes, ma'am.
We have 10 minutes. Na? So this is again in the field. This was about drugs and all. Na? But the case study that I want to show you is from a different field. We have 10 minutes, so I don't want to waste our time. Let me just, I'll stop sharing and I'll open that file first. Okay, just let me locate the file. Is the sharing on? Oh, yes, it is on. Na? Huh. Wait a minute. Okay. Let me just first locate the file. I'll show you. It'll just take a couple of minutes. Okay, so yes, I could find it almost immediately. Okay, so let me share it. Because we have time and I had thought about it, but I was not sure whether we will get enough time. So this is a totally different problem. This is another collaborative work which I am doing with a research institute at Bangalore. And so I'll quickly go through this. So those who have had any interaction with Ayurvedic doctors might have heard this, that so this is a collaborative work. These are the details of the doctors. So I'm having a collaborative work with TDU. Yesterday it was mentioned. So what is it? So when it comes to diagnosis, Ayurvedic way, the patient's prakriti is determined. So what is the prakriti of a patient? So prakriti, you might have heard the words like Vat, Pitta, Kapha, elements. Na? So usually prakriti is determined by the pulse reading. Na? The doctor would put his 2 fingers on the pulse of the patient and he will see how fast the pulse is. If the pulse is too fast, then Pitta element is considerably stronger and all. So I'm not an Ayurveda doctor, but I roughly know that once the Prakriti identification is done, then accordingly the diagnosis or the treatment is to be carried out. So Prakriti identification is a very important aspect of Ayurvedic treatment. So it doesn't matter what kind of disease, let it be diabetes, hypertension, or stroke patients, or the usual stuff like flu and viral infections. Prakriti matters a lot when it comes to deciding the dosage and the treatment. So how do they decide Prakriti? So one way is the pulse of the patient is considered. Now, as per an ancient text, Charak Samhita, the Prakriti can be determined. Sorry. Now these 3 doshas, so Prakriti, so Vata, Pitta, Kapha, these are the 3 major elements, but these aren't enough. Vata, Pitta, Kapha, then again also help in classifying. So these are the 7 types of Prakriti. So 7, only 7. So all the people across the globe belong to either of these, exactly one of these categories. So a person having high Vata goes in the category of Vataj. A person having high Pitta is Pittaj, then Kaphaj, then Vata Pitta. So those who have Vata and Pitta but almost negligible Kapha, they belong to the Vata Pitta category. Then those who have Vata and Kapha but negligible Pitta belong to Vata Kapha category, and so on. So now the question is it always physically possible for the doctor to examine the patient through the pulse and then identify the Prakriti? Or is there any another way to identify Prakriti? So Prakriti, so Charak Samhita, the ancient text, states some questions. So this I shall skip, but this Charak Samhita has around 64 questions. I'll skip this technical part. So, sorry, not 64, 62 questions are there, which are stated in Charak Samhita. So, all these questions together can help in identifying Prakriti of a person. So, a patient is asked these 62 questions, one after the other, by an expert doctor, and the patient's response is recorded, and then accordingly, a score is allotted. So, so the response can be dichotomous, say 0 or 1. So if the person, for example, was the person skinny in his childhood? Was his skin dry? Does he urinate often? So all such questions. So in all, there are 62 questions. So on the basis of these 62 questions, the person's Prakriti is to be identified. So the TDU people, my collaborators, what they have done is they have devised a method to calculate score, means the proportion of kapha a person has, the proportion of vata and pitta a person has, and then accordingly they classify. So the proportion, they call it as kapha score. So what is the kapha score of a patient? What is the vata score? What is the pitta score? So on the basis of these three scores, so on these three variables together, they try to classify the patients into these 7 categories. So they have got a data of around 600 patients, and those 600 patients have answered these 62 questions. And now for those patients, a doctor has a subject expert or a medical doctor has already identified their Prakriti, but he has also collected their responses. So now the attempt is being made by us. So this is the kind of data. So here, initially I had only 300 patients. So I have mentioned here 300, but later we got more data. So the problem is, this is a typical problem of classification. Can we classify the clusters? Can we create clusters out of these 300 patients, and can we classify them on the basis of this kapha, pitta, vata category? So the problem that ma'am had mentioned, a participant had mentioned just a couple of minutes back, is similar to this problem. So this is again a classification problem, and we have applied cluster analysis, and we have tried to apply different methods of cluster analysis, and we could find that there are approximately 7 or 8 clusters in which the patients were getting classified. So we compared their mean scores, cluster-wise mean scores, and we could see that the clusters are at least 3-4 clusters are clearly defined. So one cluster is clearly different from the other. So on the basis of mean score, we could mean kapha, pitta, vata score, we could do that. So what is the purpose of this? So the work is still under progress, but the purpose of this work is to be able to create this questionnaire. So the questionnaire is already there, but to check whether this questionnaire is as good as physical examination of the patient, and if the same patient is patient's Prakriti is identified on the basis of 62 questions, whether it is same as that which is identified by a doctor after physical examination. So this is the problem that we have been trying to work on, and the method that we have used is cluster analysis. So far it seems that cluster analysis is definitely helping in creating classification of the patients. So this was the problem that I wanted to talk about today. So yes.
Ma'am, how you confirm these clusters? Have you taken any considerations like ARI index or Silhouette score, like matrices, in order to confirm that this number of clusters are actually adequate for classification?
See, number of clusters, Charak, the ancient Ayurveda text, Charak Samhita, already mentions that there are only 7 types of Prakriti. So 7 Prakriti, so 7 clusters. So the number of clusters is not a factor here. Number of clusters is already there, decided.
Ma'am?
Yes.
Can you show the plot if it is available so that we get more clarity on this?
What do you want to see?
The visualization.
Visualization. Actually,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know whether I'll be able to show you because it's a 3D graph, na? I
Okay.
have 3 variables, na?
Okay.
I'll try.
Ma'am,
Huh.
just one more question I was having.
Huh.
So means if literature is saying that there are actually 7 possible clusters, so we don't need to validate the cluster.
No, we are trying to validate. That is what we are working on. We are trying to validate the cluster. So how do we validate the cluster? So I should know actual values also, na? So what is the prakriti of a person actually after examination by a doctor? So that should match with the classification that we are doing. Then only I can say that it's working.
Okay, so actually I belong from management discipline, ma'am.
Okay.
So there actually we validate it through these scores actually, and the adequate number of clusters is also validated through an H index,
Yes, yes.
which actually tells you the elbow. Okay, that
Yes.
at
I am
which
aware of
point.
the elbow scree plot or elbow plot.
Yeah.
Right now. So, but see here, number of clusters is not a question. It's already there.
Okay.
So I can't change. They want 7 categories, and I have seen the data itself shows 7 categories. So it's not like I'm forcing the clusters, the 7 clusters. They automatically appear. Even in 3D graph, we don't have time, but I will have to run some part of the code to create the 3D interactive. It's an interactive graph, na? So it takes time to get it loaded. And this was not planned part of the talk. So I can't show it to you now, but it's possible. In R, we can create a 3D dynamic graph. So you can hover over the graph, you can move it the way you want, you can see it from the top or bottom, and you can try to understand what all is happening here if we apply cluster analysis.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Any other question?
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, good evening.
Yes.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
I have a small doubt, ma'am, regarding linear regression.
Yes.
That diagonal line and the data points. Madam, it is mandatory to connect all the data points to get the diagonal line.
See, some points, not every data point is going to follow your model. That's why there will be error. So in some sense, the error should be as minimum as possible. So if your adjusted R squared value is say more than 0.7, then you don't bother.
Madam, actually, my doubt is, actually, I don't know R programming as of now, but today you give me some idea. I got some idea. And earlier I was used the ChatGPT and I was asked in the Google Colab with Python programming. I have 27 data points. So in the 27 data points, it was not taken all the 27 points. It was taken approximately 6 to 7 points to get the diagonal straight line. Is it okay or it is mandatory to connect all the points? That's
No,
my
no,
ask.
it's enough. It's a good number.
And ma'am, because again I was asked in Google Colab, connect all the 27 points and draw the linear regression line. Then it was showing that up and down lines. So then I think that so earlier it was right. This was wrong. That's why it was taken only connected points only. I think like that.
You can share your graphs if you
Okay,
can
madam. Okay, madam.
write an email, share
So,
the graphs. I will
finally
tell
said
you.
that no need to connect all the points. No need to show all the points, right, ma'am?
You
that graph?
don't means some points will be definitely away from fitted regression line. That is bound to happen. Even in my case, you could have seen this.
It was out of 27 points in that graph. It is showing only six or 7 points only. 6 or 7 data points only. Those points are already. Those points are near to that straight line.
The rest of the points are away. Then it may not be a good model.
Yeah, that's why. So it is okay, no problem, ma'am.
See, that will get reflected in the R squared value, na? ChatGPT will show you R squared value also.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
For clustering, what combinations of data are used? Like now, categorical plus what kind of combination of data?
At least one should be numerical, na?
Okay, yeah.
See, otherwise, clustering won't give you good results. Now, how would it classify?
Okay,
You should have at least one. See, if all are categorical, then you already have classification.
okay.
Or
Thank you.
different all possible combinations of those variables that would give you classes. How would it? It's not all can't be qualitative. At least one should be quantitative. So here
Okay.
the data I was referring to all were quantitative. Na? Kapha score, Vata score. So all values were between 0 and 120.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Ajinkya.
Are you trying to show that plot if possible?
Which one?
The last example, Ayurvedic.
The Ayurveda. Let me try. I think I had stored. I had said, let me try. But if you have another lecture now, then we should stop, na? Do you have another talk now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I think we should stop. But I'm afraid I can't show you the graph now because the next speaker is already there waiting.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, madam, for your starting with the simple regression and how to, let's say, predict the values from or infer the values, right? And then the two case studies, right? One from the Ayurveda and one from the medical field. Both examples are very good and give the insight of the regression model, basically. Even though it is a simple regression, but we can extend to the different regression models. Thank you, ma'am. Okay.
Thank you. I
It
hope you
was
find this
very
useful.
wonderful session, ma'am. Very
Thank you.
informative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.